You know, one of the things that I get asked a lot is how do you go ahead and build good, competitive, strong teams in this game? So what I wanted to go ahead and show you guys was an option that I had for building teams. Now, a lot goes into it, whether it's Z abilities, whether it's tags, whether it's equipment, and there's just a lot of different intangibles. There are even characters that get bonuses when they're alongside a certain character, like Krillin and Goku, Gohan and Goku. Like, there are different combinations, whether the character has to get KO'd or whatever the case is, but there are a lot of different intangibles. So I'm going to try to cover most of that. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. But the most important thing I can tell you is just be aware of your units. Just go over your units, see what they do, see what they don't do. A really good resource for that would be legends.dbz.space, to where you can see them all on the computer or phone, whatever. Again, legends.dbz.space. Very good website for that type of thing, just to get familiar with your units. But I'll probably wind up answering most of the questions, so feel free to listen all the way through. If you do have any, I might answer it. But the most important thing that I want to point out when it comes to all the different intangibles, variables, when it comes to building teams, is the characters that have good Z abilities and the tags that they support. So here's an example of a Sun Family / Hybrid Saiyan team, and I was actually using this team for a video that I recorded earlier today. So if you want to go ahead and check that out, the link will be down below in the description. But otherwise, let's take a look at this Gohan. So my example for this is, and of course there are characters that are different colors, different types, like support type, you know, melee type, blast type, whatever. Well, range type. But when we go down, we look at the tags, Hybrid Saiyan and Sun Family. So those are the two most important things when it comes to this character specifically, and the units that are around him. So when it comes to the Z ability, plus 17% to every character that has the tag Sun Family, aka one of him. But he gives 17% blast attack increase to the blast stat, right? So that's really good if you especially have characters that really need that type of boost, or they specialize in something like that. So that's something that you need to be aware of. Now, a lot of people don't know this because I don't know if the game really tells you too much about it, but when you take your team, right, you have these 6, you go into battle, say you choose the Goten, you know, the Trunks, and the Gohan in the top row. The 3 on the bottom, they would not be active for the battle, but they still supply their Z ability buffs. So even if the character is not in battle, the Z ability that they have still and always will apply to the characters that they are applicable to. The reason why I say applicable to is because you have characters like this, there are a lot of them that do elemental boosts, so he's only able to support other green units that are on his team, himself included, right? So the Goten is another example, only able to support other blue units that are on the team, but he also can siphon off all the other buffs the characters have. So for example, we come here, these are all the Z ability buffs that this Goten, is picking up right now on this team, regardless of who he enters the battle with. Again, if you only even choose him, right, all 5 of the other characters that he has buffs he can pull from, he will be getting. So these buffs are always going to be active on this character in his current team build. You see he's getting 26 from the Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, 17 from the red Gohan. The yellow Gohan's giving him 19% more HP. The Goten, like, he's getting a lot, right? So that's how this generally breaks down. So you want to be aware of your Z abilities, you want to be aware of your character tags and things like that, and just try to build your team around that. Now, of course, I'm talking from a position where I have extensive options, right? But this guide does apply to you too if you don't have every unit in the game, which is going to be a lot of you guys, that's fair. But even if you don't have every unit in the game, you can try to make do with what you have, right? For example, if you have EX units, there are some very powerful ones that have very powerful Z abilities, some of which are able to support tags, others aren't. But another option for you guys is, if you're kind of working with obviously a limited roster, you know, you can take a character that you really want to build around. It just depends what team you're trying to focus on. Maybe it's Saiyans, maybe you have Gogeta and like Super Vegeta, and you don't have much else. You know, maybe you have a few good Saiyans and you just kind of need to round out the rest of the team. Another option for something like that would be if we kind of just knock some of these units off. This is another option. I'm going to go ahead and swap him with Gogeta right here. So, and like I said, for the example, I listed a couple of hybrids, so, or excuse me, just Saiyans. So these are units that are currently on Gogeta's banner, I believe. So we're just going to start off with them. Say you were fortunate enough to pull all 3 of them. And if you take a look at the details, Gogeta is currently picking up the buff from Goku, from Super Vegeta as well, because Gogeta is fortunate enough to be able to have numerous tags, right? He also picks up his own buff because the buffs do apply to the same character. Now, if you're in a position like this, something that you can do is you can start looking to mono supports. Now, when we go to extreme units, extremes are littered with them. You can look to characters that have Z abilities that buff a specific character color. So, for example, we can put this guy here because, as you saw, the little blue flash that happens to Gogeta when I put him on the team, I'm going to do it now. Look at Gogeta. The little blue flash, that means that the buff is applying to him, so Gogeta will be picking up the Z ability buff from this Vegeta. Strike, attack, and defense plus 22%. That actually synergizes very well with Gogeta, who is a strike-oriented unit. So you can do things like that, round out your team with a couple of units like this, and if you plan to mainly be using Super Vegeta as well, maybe put a yellow one there, or maybe you also have an extreme unit like this that is able to support just Saiyans in general, right? Because he also has HP boost for natural Saiyans just on the team. Now, be aware that hybrid Saiyans do not have the Saiyan tag. They only get buffs from hybrid Saiyans. They do not get the Saiyan buffs at all. They're Saiyans, but they are hybrids. They don't get them. So maybe you do something like that. Now, there's also a bleed through between that as well. As you're going to see when I put this Raditz in, that red Vegeta, for example, is going to pick up the buff from the Raditz too, because he is a Saiyan character. So there's a little bit of a blurred line there, bridge gapping there, if you will, where you choose those characters, they can still get buffs from other characters. Now, 17 wouldn't be a character that you would use, but again, his Z ability buff would always be applied to Gogeta, boosting Gogeta's blast attack and defense during the battle. So that's an example for you guys to kind of round out your teams. If you have a specific unit or two, you can even kind of change it up a little bit to where you add another blue support for the Goku or whatever, things like that. But if you're trying to round out your team, right? And there are different units that are good at bridging gaps as well among having like tag supports. So this is a really good example. He boosts Super Saiyan tag supports. Now, this is good because there are a lot of characters that are actually Super Saiyan, but keep in mind Super Saiyan 2s and, of course, Super Saiyan 3s, Blues, whatever, in the future as the game dates, they do not pick up that Z ability buff, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what I mean here. So among Super Saiyans, we have that. We're going to add in SS2 Gohan, who's currently the only SS2 Gohan in the game, or SS2 character in the game. As you see, Gogeta has Super Saiyan, so he does pick up the Super Vegeta buff right here. Gohan will not, because he does not have access to Super Saiyan's tag. So you have to be aware of little things like that. It says Super Saiyan 2. He doesn't have Super Saiyan. He doesn't have Saiyan, so he doesn't pick up those buffs. So you got to be aware of that. Now, there are some very good teams that synergize very well. Some options for you guys that I would recommend are primarily, full Saiyan builds. And here's an example of I don't want to say like cheaper option, but it just kind of depends because everybody's box is a little bit different. But here's an example of a relatively easier to get option for like a team build for Saiyans naturally. And I'm not going to go over like, use this team because I don't know what everybody has, right? So we're going to go over that. We're going to put you in the team. We're going to put you in the team. Some of these units have been offered as like, units via the adventures or like the PvP at a time and stuff like that. So here's a few units. This Vegeta, I believe, also has a Saiyan tag ability buff here. Base blast attack plus 23% to Saiyans. You have a well-rounded team there and stuff like that. You can also dip into heroes as well if you need to. You have Shallot. He's a very good option for a Saiyan well-rounded team, boosting HP further. They do stack, by the way. Raditz and Shallot have the same Z ability, but they do stack. As you see, the characters do pick up both abilities. Raditz and Shallots are there. So there's things that you can do like that. So another thing that I want to mention to you guys is be sure to cover your bases, CYA, because when it comes down to having your team, it's particularly if you're in PvP. Again, the teams change if you're taking on story stages because sometimes you have different requirements, but particularly in PvP, you're going to run up into other teams that are probably well-constructed, meta teams, depending on how high up in ranking you get, and you have to be able to handle those threats. So, like, if you're going up against, if you're running Saiyans, you want to make sure that you have the ability to match up with Gogetas, for example. So what does that mean? Bring some strong blue characters. There are a couple of really good blue characters I can recommend for things like that, being this guy who's a full free-to-play option from the shop there. He boosts your character's strike defense, which is amazing because that helps counter what Gogeta wants to do mainly. He's mainly a strike unit. Also has some very powerful blast arts buffs, but I digress. Another really good option would be the Super Saiyan Goku there. And all of a sudden, you can kind of cover your butt a little bit when it comes to Gogeta specifically. I don't really too much recommend bringing too many units of the same color in a lot of scenarios, even if you're trying to do the thing where, like I was saying earlier, you can use characters that have elemental buffs and boost up certain characters that way. But just be aware, make sure that you have at least one character, if you can, of every element on your team, and make sure that your team synergize as well, so that way you can build a team that can handle various threats, like, King Piccolo and regeneration teams, Majin Buu. You want to make sure you have a powerful purple unit on the team. There aren't a whole lot, but again, just for example, the Vegeta here, there aren't a whole lot of purple Saiyans that are like super good. You can do things like this, add him in the team as well, and then Bardock can round out, and all of a sudden you have a red character, a couple blues, a green, a purple, and a yellow. You have a very well-rounded team that will be able to deal with a lot of different threats that that you could potentially see when it comes to different matchups versus different opponents if you're in PvP again. But make sure that you, again, are trying to build your team around boosted characters if you have them. A lot of times, boost characters would be characters that just launched or just came out in the game. So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope that this guide was helpful for you guys. If it was, make sure you leave a thumbs up. If you want to check out the gameplay for this Gohan, down below. The link is down below in the description. Anyways, have an awesome day, everybody, and I'll catch all of you in the next one.